felt kind of just gray, and the emotional, when you watch programs where they're like ER and they've got that thing, the heartbeat thing, it's like beep beep
Yeah.
beep 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 beep, and that's it.
Anxious attachers. That's usually the common relationship dynamic, because we have to quit taking it personally. Stop making it mean something about you. It's not about you all the time.
Wondered why your partner is pushing you away because you're like an avalanche every day, all day. So listeners, back for another episode, and today we're going to get deep into the idea, this concept of emotional safety. What is it? How does it impact us? What does it feel like we don't have it? And for the men listening, why does your partner keep telling you she doesn't feel emotionally safe, or she doesn't feel like emotionally you're there, or you feel distant, or she feels like she can't connect with you even though she's standing right in front of you, or she feels like you're never listening? These are the sort of sentences that you're hearing, particularly for the men listening, which is the majority of the people listening to this podcast, of what you're experiencing. So we're going to really talk about emotional safety, and I have with me a woman who has so much experience in this area of emotional safety, but also has so much wisdom when it comes to attachment and relationships and connection and dating, and how we can do these things incredibly well. I came across this guest via her podcast, which I was at time listening to on long drives and in between in my mornings on my way to the gym. Today we have Jessica. How are you doing today, Jessica?
Thank you so much, David, for having me. I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here and to talk about my favorite topic: attachment, emotional safety, love, relationships. So thank you.
I'll start with a little definition, actually. Is when people say emotional safety, what do they actually mean?
Yeah, well, I truly believe that all humans have an innate need to feel seen, to feel heard, right? To feel validated, to feel reassured, to feel understood. So when you cultivate emotional safety within a relationship, it's really just those people, right? The partners really showing each other those things. So rather than getting defensive, for instance, rather than shutting down or withdrawing or becoming highly reactive, it's, one or both partners really holding space to hear the other person, validating what the other person is experiencing or saying. Really trying to understand, right, where the other person is coming from. So there's a sense of curiosity and love and compassion versus reactivity and dismissiveness and withdrawal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I think of those things, emotional reactiveness and withdrawal are things that I've done many times in my life, and I'll probably continue to do so from time to time, because we never become immune. But when we talk about emotional safety, how do we know we're experiencing emotional safety in our relationships? Because it can be, as you talk about it there, we understand the words, we understand what it looks like when it's not there. But like, what does it actually kind of feel like? What's the texture of it that in the relationship?
So a good navigation system is always tuning into your feelings, right? Tuning into the sensations in your body. So if your nervous system is feeling regulated in a situation or with a person, right? When it's regulated, it's usually calm. It can be present, right? You're more present in situations. You feel more open to express. That's your nervous system, right? Letting you know that, hey, we're safe here. This feels good. This is a safe environment or a safe person. And so the opposite of that is when you're feeling kind of panicky, when you're feeling kind of closed off, that feeling of walking on eggshells. That's your nervous system telling you, hey, we're dysregulated here. There's some emotional needs here that are not being met. We don't feel safe. We don't feel secure. So it's really just tuning into your body and tuning into your feelings, because that's going to tell you if you're in a safe environment versus an unsafe environment.
Yeah. So it's checking in with ourselves, our own feelings, what's going on for us. And are there times where, is it for some people that, actually me say more about this, is sometimes I speak to men in particular who I work with, and they never feel emotionally safe, no matter what's happening around them, right? And I know women feel exactly the same way. No matter how the relationship is and how someone's there for them, how someone listens, their internal experience often is like, oh no, I can't actually express myself. I can't say what I want. I have to always walk on eggshells. Like what's going on there?
Yeah. So a lot of it is your, conditioning, If we're speaking more to the avoidant man, for instance, or just the avoidant person, because women can also be avoidant, their nervous system never really felt safe with intimacy. They never learned how to talk about feelings, how to tune into their emotions, how to tune into their bodily sensations in that way. So it's, when your body isn't familiar to doing those things and acting in those ways, any situation where they might have to do that, again, it's going to be a little bit alarming. It's going to be a little bit weird for them. So automatically their nervous system is like, ooh, this is weird. This is icky. This is unfamiliar territory. But the more that you can put yourself in that situation, expose yourself to those situations in a safe environment, the more that your system will become familiar with that space too, and familiar with that sense of vulnerability. But it's so, so important because we were wounded within relationships. We also heal in relationships. And so it's important to find someone who can provide that safe space for you to open up.
Yeah, and he said there's a wounding in relationship, healing in relationship.
Yeah.
I feel sometimes people really, I speak to guys and they're like, I got hurt once or twice, and I'm giving up. It doesn't exist. The safety I want or the sort of person I want doesn't exist. And I'm going off a bit of a tangent here, and I always find that quite sad because of my own experience of being hurt many times and realizing that it wasn't necessarily me that was getting hurt. I was doing most of the hurting to others, really, and learning that actually that safety that I believed wasn't there because I wasn't creating it. I wasn't creating that safety. So I guess that makes me think of actually, this is a good question. How can someone who doesn't feel that emotional safety internally, how can they start to create that in their external environment? Because there could well be a potential that they're living in a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and they're creating it themselves.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to answer that, but I'm curious to hear about your experience as well with it. But I would say, so a really simple, practical technique, right, that you can do with yourself. This is what I suggest for clients to do, is just a feelings and needs check-in. It's very, very simple, but you just have to be consistent with the practice. So again, if you're a bit more avoidant, if you're a bit more shut off or conditioned to, not feel safe within the emotional world, or intimacy or vulnerability, set a few reminders on your phone to just stop what you're doing and just check in with yourself. So check in with what you're feeling. And it could be check in with what you're feeling and what you're needing. So it could be a physiological need, right, for air, food, shelter, water. Or it could be an emotional need for, hey, oh my God, I need to socialize. I need to connect. I need some sort of validation right now, right? So you're stopping what you're doing and you're asking yourself, okay, what am I feeling right now? It could be as simple as, I feel thirsty. Why? Because I haven't had water today. What do I need? I need to go get some water and replenish my thirst. Very simple, just attuning. This is attunement. And attunement is all about attachment, right? It's all about how we attach to ourselves. It's the level of attunement, and avoidance did not get that level of attunement, unfortunately. So they bypass attunement. That's why in relationships, there is no attunement really, because they don't know how to attune, not even to themselves. So that simple practice of learning how to cultivate that with yourself is beautiful, because you're learning a new skill. And then let's say, for instance, there's an emotional need, and this is where it gets a little bit trickier for the avoidant, but maybe they stop what they're doing and they tune in. Okay, what am I feeling? Ooh, I feel kind of lonely right now. All right, why am I feeling lonely? I've just been working nonstop. I haven't socialized. I haven't connected with friends or family. I need some connection here. Okay, so I need connection. Perfect. You identified the feeling. You identified the need. Wonderful. Like, that's cultivating a relationship with yourself. That's cultivating attunement with yourself. You're developing this new language. And the more you do that, the more you can communicate that same language in your romantic relationships or in your friendships, whatever it is.
It starts with understanding more deeply what's going on in our own experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you notice, like, avoidance, right? speaking more to the avoidance here because this is, the topic that we teach or that I talk about so much, but there's just this experience of bypassing emotions.
Mm.
So where can I focus all of this energy? Where can I focus all of this attention? Okay, on work, on hobbies, on distractions, right? On just other things outside of myself. So once you start to reconnect with yourself and what you're actually experiencing internally, that's a whole new world. And that's really the world that we need in intimate relationships.
I know this very well because I spent many years not wanting to be with my own internal experience, feeling like it was overwhelming, it was too much, it was confusing, and not even being able to do that piece of attunement of being like, what am I feeling? I don't know. I just feel this flatness, this numbness, this just like okayness. I used to describe it as feeling everything feels very grey almost all of the time, apart from when I feel really, really sad, and then some moments of feeling like joy. But for the most part, this life felt kind of just grey, and the emotional, when you watch programs where they're like ER and they've got that thing, the heartbeat thing, it's like beep, beep,
Yeah.
beep, 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 beep. Like life felt like beep, 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 and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's common. That's common as well. And also, it's such a different language too, because even though you might be feeling more of that like stability or numbness, there's a conditioning to that, right? Because you've kind of suppressed emotions for so long, it's harder to access them. So it's not that they aren't there. They are. Your system is just used to suppressing it. So once you can start doing this practice of, okay, how can I start accessing my feelings little by little? Whether, again, it's that physiological need and then ultimately the emotional need, you can start to begin to access the feelings little by little. So it's those little daily consistent practices that allow you to open up a little bit more.
Consistent work makes a difference, the more than like the big experiences that we so often chase.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard. How has it been for you personally with not being able to access those feelings sometimes or just having challenges with that in relationships? I'm curious.
Yeah, I spent probably, it wasn't until I'd say I was about 32 that's like 10 years ago really, that I kind of opened up to the richness of my own emotional experience. I was just kind of doing, operating, feeling very like flatline a lot of the time. And the big problem really was like relationships, especially the early stages. I was really good at early stage relationships. That first like dating stage into the first kind of 3-6 months, I'm wonderful at that. I was great at that. But once it started to get like, people have needs, people have requirements they need, needing to attune, having to like notice how my partner's feeling, create that emotional safety that they could speak. And I wasn't judgmental, I wasn't like critical, I wasn't minimizing of their feelings and emotions in situations. I was just constantly doing that. I was constantly, and to me, I grew up I remember I went to some self-development seminars and they were like, feelings and emotions aren't real. And though there is some truth in that, it gave me the ammunition at a young age to be like, I don't even want to listen to your feelings because they're not real. Let's not even bother with those things. And it's interesting because as I say now, I remember it's like, oh yeah, I took this kind of concept that was quite nuanced and had some depth to it and a lot of explanation around it. And I took it and I weaponized it to use it for my own good of having kind of neutrality. And all I did was create like emotional unsafety constantly. Ways I was there for my partner, I could be there in very practical ways. But if they sat down and started telling me particularly about my behavior and how it made them feel, that would be incredibly overwhelming. My emotional capacity couldn't hold that. All I heard was, I've done something wrong and I'm bad. So it took me a number of years. I had one kind of big event that kind of blew me open, and then probably a lot of small experiences of feeling, of choosing to feel, choosing to stay in feeling instead of exiting. But it was really a very conscious choice of wanting something, my experience of relationship to be different.
Yeah. Yeah. That's your experience is just, it's what I hear all the time, with the avoidant attachment. And it's interesting because, yes, what I find with avoidant attachments is that they're so intellectual about things. They intellectualize everything. Let's find a solution, right? Let's not talk about the feelings. Let's just find a solution, because it's very, they want to get away from the conflict. Let's just settle this now. But in that process, again, we bypass the emotional experience. And oftentimes avoidance end up with anxious attachers. That's usually the common relationship dynamic, because that it creates such a beautiful balance, right? One provides such nurturance and warmth and emotional depth, and the avoidant provides more of that stability and that reliability and that, a rock essentially in that relationship, the stability, emotional stability in the relationship. So there could be so much good to it, but they have to understand the differences and learn to speak each other's languages a little bit, and respect those differences too. Yeah.
That's so interesting. You've said that in a way that like it's such a beautiful. I agree with you, right? Because there is that, and the kind of stability that for the other person you can maybe be a little bit emotional and reactive to things, and be there for them and so forth. And the other person can be deeply feeling, which kind of gives the avoidant person some access to those feelings that they don't want to go near. But most people would not describe anxious avoidant relationships like that. And but I really love it, because I also see that, right, in my own relationship now. And also to some degree in my past relationships as well, that, I could be super stable in, I can be in the most chaotic moments, and I can be so focused and present, or appear to be at least, compared to my partner. But yeah, that take on the anxious avoidant relationship, that's quite a unique take that doesn't exist on social media anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about the anxious and avoidant dynamic, and there's just so much criticism around it. But the reality is that is the common relationship dynamic that we see, whether we like it or not. And even if someone is secure, right? Because no one's 100% secure. It's either you are secure, maybe leaning a little bit avoidant, or secure, leaning a little bit, anxious. No one's perfect. So we're always going to lean a little bit one way or the other. And what I find is that even with predominantly secure couples, there's still one that's a little bit more anxious and a little bit more avoidant. It's the balance that we need, right? It's that polarity.
And it's beautiful to hear you say that, because I've in the last couple of years, I've been looking at like my friends and their relationships. And like, I've got some friends who are in relationships. They've been in relationships for 10, 15 years, happy. Like, they're rare people that actually seem happy, and they have fun together and they laugh. And I can see it very clearly for myself. Like, oh, he is definitely the more avoidant one, or she's definitely more avoidant one. But they're not like extremely on either ends, but they just have this, like you said, that polarity, and it works. And it works because, as you said, there's an appreciation of difference. And I feel like this is something that's super interesting, because, and I guess I'd love to get your take on this actually. And as you've been in practice for a number of years, do you see a shift in people, and maybe an increasing or a decreasing in appreciation of difference in their partners or the people that they meet?
I think that the more awareness that they have around these topics and work that they do, right? That inner work, the therapy work that they do, they start to appreciate the differences. I know for me personally, my last relationship, around 7 years or so, I was a little bit more anxious. He was a little bit more avoidant. And doing this work, I started to really appreciate the fact that he was independent and resourceful and stoic, and the way that I was able to learn from that. I learned a lot from that. I learned my own sense of stability. I learned how to be more autonomous as a human, more individualistic. It was beautiful to create that balance, because I was so on one side of the spectrum for so long. So I started to really appreciate that. Fortunately, that relationship ended for other reasons. But, I'm, in a relationship currently with someone who leans a little bit more anxious. And now I'm, definitely more secure, but I notice some of my avoidant aspects coming in, which is interesting. Again, it's such a spectrum, right? And our attachment styles can resurface in so many different ways, depending on the circumstance, depending on the person. And now I'm able to, rather than getting annoyed with, wow, this person is, wow, they're hyper focused, like, wow, they really need reassurance. They really want to see me all the time. I'm not, I love that you're laughing. I'm able to appreciate the fact that this person deeply, deeply craves and loves connection, and they're warm and they're attuned. I went from someone who kind of bypassed that and didn't really recognize a lot of the nuances within me to someone who picks up on every little beautiful thing about me. And that's like how I feel so seen. And that's kind of uncomfortable. And I'm starting to learn how to be a bit more okay with that as well, right? So
That's interesting. It's almost like to swing that away. It's like almost like some shadow work you have to go through, like, oh, wait a minute. I used to be like, I was like this. You're like, oh, how do I feel about myself when I'm looking, not quite in the mirror, but there's a level of looking in your mirror, at this other person, how they're treating you and how they're being. And you're like, oh, wow, I did / do that. Oh, how do I feel about myself? And how do you react to that person? Do you, react to it like it is shadow material, you push it away and judge it and so forth?
Yeah. And the reaction is to be like, hey, like, chill out, slow down, maybe like stop. But you're not going to do that because you've been on that other side and you know what that anxiety feels like. So there's more compassion for the experience. You know how to deal with it in a healthier way. So much of this work, whether you're anxious or avoidant, is to learn how to tune into what you're feeling and what you're needing, right? Like learning how to find that focus too, rather than feeling like pressure from feeling consumed, rather than feeling that sense of suffocation that can come from relationships. How can I like stay in my present? How can I just stay centered and hear this person out and see where they're coming from or what they need, and then also honor myself and honor my own needs, not feeling like I have to bypass my own boundaries, right? So it's learning how to kind of sit with that discomfort that you're feeling inside, and then communicating and honoring what it is that you're feeling and needing. And if you do that practice enough times with yourself, it's like you begin to form that language and it just kind of happens automatically. And if that person respects you, if they see you, if they're, there for you, that's a great sign. But if that person gets super defensive, they don't want to listen, they become super reactive, they don't respect your boundaries, well, that's not my person, So it's such a great filtering system as well.
Yeah. And that work of being able to sit with what emotions arise, what's there in us, like that's such an important practice, regardless of your attachment, because it can seem like, from the outside that it's the anxious person that doesn't have the capacity for that. As an avoidant person, I've seen that very clearly in my partners. But actually, the avoidant person has exactly the same problem. It just manifests differently externally.
Yeah. Well, the Mary Ainsworth, experiment, right, where they assess the different attachment styles, there's that piece. But then after that, there's also been other studies around, monitoring the anxiety levels, the stress levels of each of the attachment styles. And so both of them are experiencing that sense of anxiety, that sense of relational stress. It's just like what you said, they cope with it differently. It's just different coping styles. So a lot of this is really self-regulation work, right? Learning how to process your emotions in a healthy way, learning how to sit with your emotions in a healthy way. I know for me, a lot of that happened. I did a lot of this work when I was single, where I just, again, tuning into my feelings, or whenever I was experiencing any kind of stress, I would put my hands on my heart and just sit with that feeling, sit with the discomfort for a while, until my body can recognize, hey, it's safe. It's safe to be with discomfort. I'm not going to die in this situation, right? And so the more that you can create that level of safety with yourself and that level of recognition with yourself and your emotions, you can bring that into your relationships as well. You're not going to react impulsively, because you can sit there a little bit more, sit there a little bit longer. And that's how other people feel seen and feel safe with you, when you're present, right? Not when you're distracted or shut down.
A question I have on the emotional safety, actually, since we're talking about the anxious-avoidant divide spectrum. I like to see it as a spectrum, as you described. We can move fluidly through this spectrum depending on the moment, the relationship, the person we're with, how we're feeling that day, the weather, and so forth.
Yep.
How does someone who is anxiously attached help their avoidantly attached partner feel emotionally safe enough to kind of speak and open up? This is like the second most asked question, I imagine, that is asked.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first things first, the anxious attachment has to do their own work. Absolutely, absolutely. So they need to learn how to self-regulate. They need to learn how to reframe their narratives and their insecurities, because you cannot bring all of that thought process into your relationship. So I always suggest, having your own resources, maybe having your own therapist, having your own support system that you can talk to and process with things, because oftentimes they rely on that one partner for every little thing. That's going to push anyone away. That's too much. It's way too much. So find your own resources, find your own support system, but also, creating that safe space looks like, if your partner does express something that might not sit well with you, don't get reactive, right? Don't get defensive. There's this acronym in the attachment psychology world. It's QTIP, quit taking it personally. I think Anita, quit taking it personally, right? Because if we get defensive, there's going to be no repair. We have to quit taking it personally. Stop making it mean something about you. It's not about you all the time, right? This is someone else and their own experience and their own, emotional world. If you want to connect with them, then stop taking it personally. Hear them out. It makes me so angry because
I can tell.
I know, because avoidant attachers get such a bad reputation online, where anxious attachers are so exalted, right, in so many ways. Yet, and they say like, oh, we're so selfless and la 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 la. But really, it's a kind of selfish. The fact that you take everything so personally and make everything mean something about you, that's selfishness. That's not selflessness. That's not emotional selflessness, right? So keep that into consideration when you're speaking to your partner, but also hear them out. Hey, what are you feeling? What are you needing? I'm here to support you. And validate what they're feeling and needing, right? It's that cliche. I see that you're feeling this. It sounds like you're feeling this, and this is what you're needing. How can I meet that need for you? Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. It's, I find this, I speak to a lot of kind of coaches and therapists that work in the work with actual people, helping them. And then I find myself on Instagram, right? In my Instagram comments, and I talk about avoidant men a lot, and I might talk about some of the benefits of avoidant men and how they're good and the things they need to do. And I am met with a barrage of like how they're the worst pieces of scum on earth. And it's I'm aware you take it in good jest sometimes, but what I always hear from people like yourself, like therapists like yourself, who work with people in the room, sitting down with their stuff, is this, how there is this I don't know, arrogance in superiority that comes from anxious people, particularly online, where they're like, we did everything, it's all their fault, and so often, and I see this even in my own work when I work with anxious men, and suddenly the blind spot for themselves and their own behavior and how much weight they put on their partner and expectation and how much personalization they take on things is actually a huge slap in the face. I can use that word, slap in the face, when they realize it, because they're like, holy shit, I didn't realize I was doing this all these years. And you're like, this, and you wondered why your partner is pushing you away, because you're like an avalanche every day, all day.
Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. And such a reminder as well, right? That it takes a village. You
Mm,
cannot rely on your partner to meet all of these emotional needs for you. That is too much. It's like you said, it's an avalanche. Anyone's going to suffocate in that situation. They're going to avoid. You're not helping the situation. So learning to kind of alleviate some of that pressure and expectation is so, so beneficial.
yeah. And then the flip side, how does a avoidant attached person help their anxiously attached partner feel more emotionally safe?
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. And I think that also comes from their own work, right?
Mm,
That simple practice of just checking in with your feelings and needs, developing that language with yourself so that you can start checking in with your partner. Hey, babe, what are you feeling? What are you needing? Imagine if an avoidant attacher asked their anxiously attached partner, what are you feeling? What are you needing? I mean, breath of fresh air, right? We all want to hear that. So getting comfortable with developing that language so that you can really start checking in with your partner rather than avoiding your partner altogether. And also, I would say for the avoidant attacher, learning to set boundaries, right? If
mm,
something feels too overwhelming for you, which it can, learn to say, hey, um, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now. I need just a little bit of space to process this. Can we come back to this conversation later tonight? Or can we come back to this conversation tomorrow morning? Giving yourself that space because you also have to create a sense of safety for yourself,
mm.
right? That's important. And so once you can kind of give that information to your anxious partner, your partner in general, they need that information, right? Your partner, especially someone who leans more anxious, needs information because if they don't have that information, they're going to fill in those gaps with their own narratives, and it's usually not good. So if you can give them information about what you're feeling and needing, oof, okay, I can settle down. I know what's happening. There's some certainty here. I feel more in control.
Mm. Clarity.
Yeah.
Clarity is positive because, I speak as someone who was very avoidant. Boundaries are not something I was used to setting. It's like, oh, I should just, I don't know what to say. It's overwhelming for me. I haven't noticed it's overwhelming for me. Um, but I'm gonna just stand here and then I've dissociated. I've kind of blanked out. I'm like thinking about something else, or I'm spiraling in my mind about what to say to make this emotional situation stop. But actually, the power, as you described in the boundaries, isn't just good for the avoidant person. It gives the anxious person clarity and some understanding and even a level of kind of groundedness for them.
Absolutely. And mutual respect, right? You
Mm,
want to be in a relationship where there is that sense of mutual respect because if there isn't and you're not communicating boundaries from the beginning, let's say you get married, you have a family, all these things, and you never created boundaries, you never stood up for yourself, you've just been passive the entire time, that's going to create a lot of chaos in your relationship. So it's good for, all of us to learn how to communicate, hey, this is comfortable, this isn't. This is what I need, this is what I don't need from the very beginning so that you can better assess, okay, is this person actually compatible with my needs or not? Do they respect me or do they not? You really want to assess that from early on. So you pick a good partner.
yeah, yeah, so important, so important. Um, Gender. I'm always curious about how gender impacts our expression of our attachment because it's another, it's this level of conditioning that we kind of have on top of it. And, there's the age old, I think the stereotype is that, all men are avoidant and all women are anxious. I feel like that's the stereotype that has been proliferated through media, through television, through, I don't know how long, my whole life has been what I've seen this. But I wonder, like, from your point of view, how does gender impact our expression of our attachment?
I think it's also demographic as well, right?
Mm,
Like I know that in the Western world, men generally tend to be a bit more avoidant, whereas women are a bit more anxious. But to be honest, like I see a lot of avoidant women nowadays,
mm,
and with the feminine movement, there's been a lot of suppression with emotion and women feeling like they have to really be more strong and more stoic and, emotionless in a lot of ways. So I think that and more independent, like very, very hyper independent. You're seeing that a lot with women today as well. So there's been a shift in that expression for sure. But, for instance, my parents are Brazilian, so I'm very accustomed to like the Brazilian South American culture. You see a lot of there's a lot of anxious men, you know,
Mhm.
depending on how they were raised. So it really does depend on the culture. It depends on, where they were raised, how they were raised. But generally speaking, in the Western world, you do see more of that avoidance in men. Yeah, but there's a shift in that as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely socialized. Avoidance, is socialized into men, that way of, like you said, being stoic, the kind of being what we see as being kind of traditionally masculine is like holding our emotions in, not feeling anything, being strong. And I actually, another question as I say this is like, how does that, from what you've seen, how does that kind of socialization of how a man should be, that a masculine man should be, impact kind of more anxiously attached men who are more deeply feeling, are more maybe does like naturally as they can be, like emotionally expressive, but then they have this conditioning that sits on top of them that's kind of constantly telling them how they should and shouldn't be, especially in the Western world.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I think it's so beautiful when I encounter men who are sensitive or connected to their sensitivity, at least, right? They're connected to their sensitivity. They're attuned to their emotions. I think that's so beautiful. And I think that with anything in life, it's finding the balance. So whether you are hyper masculine, right? Hyper independent, hyper resourceful, emotionally cut off, how can you just kind of come back to balance? What would it look like to tune into your emotions just a tad more to find that balance where you're not neglecting your masculinity, but you're also connecting to your emotional experience, which is healthy for any human? And then if you're a bit more sensitive, right? Maybe you're a bit more feminine as a man. Um, again, how can you learn to set more boundaries? Because usually what I find with men that tend to be a bit more express themselves in more, or they have more of these feminine traits, right? Maybe they're a bit more emotional, sensitive, things like that. Um, how can they learn how to set boundaries? How can they learn how to be more assertive? There's a sense of passivity there, and that can
Mm.
kind of get in the way of their relationships. But in terms of shame around that, I don't really experience that too much. I don't really experience that too much with more of like the sensitive man, I would say.
Mm.
What I see is that oftentimes they link up with the opposite, which is normal, right? We look for the opposite. So they link up with women that are a bit more avoidant, for instance, or a bit stronger in that sense. And they feel like, okay, that's where they experience more of the shame is when they're in relationship. And then that's where they want to learn how to be a bit more assertive. They want to learn how to be a bit more expressive, to stand up for themselves, to lead the relationship. That's where I see more men come into the work. But when they're single, I don't really see that problem. It's more so when they are in a relationship that they start to really see the imbalance, if
Mm.
that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense because they experience like a couple of things, don't they? They experience that they're like the man, but then they experience themselves as not being kind of showing up as the man. They experience their partner as being that way, and that kind of coming up against that kind of socialization of being the strong, not controlling or dominating, but like the man, and feeling like, oh, that's not me, that's her, and what does that mean about me?
Yes. Yeah. So it's interesting that within relationships, we really start to experience those shadows, right? It's those
Mm.
shadows that start to come up within relationship dynamics. But yeah, oftentimes when they're single, I don't really see that problem. It's mostly just when they're in relationship, they see that drastic difference. Yeah.
Mm. And these men are really interesting to me, not because there's anything wrong with them. If you're an anxiously attached man, listen to this. It's like I think that often their experience in dating is like the hidden dating experience, because there's women are more openly vocal about their dating experiences, particularly anxiously attached women. Avoidantly attached women, I don't think they're particularly vocal about their experience in dating, because for the most part, the ones I've met and spoken to, they have a regular supply of pretty good men who are emotionally speaking and opening up. And in fact, that they're often the ones who feel like the man isn't quite right, there's something wrong, they don't want to commit, blah, blah, blah. So they're not necessarily expressing their experience too massively. And you've got the anxiously attached men, because they've also been socialized by that kind of man box of like not talking too much. So they don't talk and complain about complain or voice their experience so much. But then the rising voice that we hear is the voice of the anxiously attached woman, who is talking about the avoidantly attached man, who is the least likely man to speak publicly about his dating experiences. So this becomes a kind of dominant narrative, like how dating is. And I know I said a lot there, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Good point. Because now that I'm reflecting, yes, I think that the anxiously attached woman's voice is much louder than the anxiously attached man's voice. Yes, usually with men, I see more of the passivity. With women, I see more of the reactivity. So I think that might be a part of the socialization as well, where men might not feel like it's safe enough to, speak louder or be a bit more outwardly reactive, right? They might just suppress it. They might become more passive aggressive, for instance, whereas women might be more outwardly aggressive. Yeah.
No, I yeah, definitely. And the way you said that there actually is kind of the anxious man becoming passive, because that is the socialization of men. It's like, don't, pardon me, as much as we're like, men often are like, don't take up space, don't talk too much, don't say anything you don't need to say. So that socialization sits on top of their experience. And I feel I should write an article about this actually, is, the silent pain that they experience in dating and relationships, that when they do speak up, they're like, no, that's not what's happening, because there's 20 women saying, no, dude, you're wrong. That's not how all men are. And I guess that funnels me into another question, another point actually here is how it's very easy for us to believe in any individual person, depending on our attachments. I'll give an example. Say, for instance, and I'll use myself an example. When I was in my 20s and early 30s, I believed that all women just wanted commitment as fast as possible, that was super needy, that was super emotional, that were a bit unstable. That's what I believed. And that lens was predominantly through my own personal experience of the women I met. And I'm not saying that that's not completely detached from what I was doing, but that was my experience. Yeah. The anxious man's experience could be very, very different. He could be like, well, all the women I meet, they're super aloof. They don't really want to commit. Like, I want to open up and I want to love them. And they're like shielded and they're ice queens and so forth. And I guess what I'm getting at is, it's so easy for us to believe that our view of dating, or our view of the opposite sex or the sex we're attracted to, is how they all are. And we just say, this is how all of them are, without actually stopping and going, oh, what's kind of my part in this? And is that really how they all are? Or is that just how the ones that I'm attracted to are?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so much of that comes from even your childhood experiences with what you experienced with your attachment figures, right? I know for me, my dad was more avoidant. So he was much more aloof, like you said, much more passive, much more shut down, wasn't very attuned to my feelings or my needs, whereas my mom was much more reactive. So that's the normal. That's what I thought was normal. And that's what I naturally was attracted to in men growing up. So I think that's very common to generalize. Again, I think your system, it recognizes what's familiar, not necessarily what's good or healthy for you. And then this is why so great attachment science, to help you understand these patterns and how you relate and how you experience love. Because once you understand, oh, it's not that I need this or that this type of person is actually good for me or healthy for me. It's just that I'm just used to it. It's all I know. So what do I need actually? What do I want actually? And that's where you can start to really break those patterns. Yeah.
Yeah. And it made me think of this, of attraction. you know, a lot of people, when we think about attraction, we're like, oh, I'm attracted to this person because, you know, how does attraction actually function?
Yeah, well, there's so many factors to it, right? There's the physical attraction, there's the emotional attraction, there's the spiritual attraction. There's so many different facets to it. But from a biological standpoint, it's again, it's what is familiar to you. And that's where attachment science is so powerful in understanding that is what is familiar to you. So if unavailability is a bit more familiar to you, well, then maybe someone who's independent, who is passion focused, driven, that might be really attractive to you, right? Because there's always this level of kind of some distance there, some of like, oh, I'm not quite a priority in this person's life. So, I have to kind of chase after them. You get caught in these roles, these familiar roles that you're used to playing. And this is all subconscious, by the way, right? Or maybe this person is very high achieving, and maybe your father was very high achieving, or whoever your attachment figure was growing up, and that's attractive to you. So it's really just assessing your past, assessing your attachment patterns, and really asking yourself, wait a second, is this good for me? I know this is attractive. I know that I feel this attraction, but is this sustainable? And that's where maturity comes in. That's where maturity comes in, is making the choice that's actually sustainable, not the choice that just feels good in the moment because you're used to it.
Yeah, the maturity, what feels good in the moment,
Yeah.
it's often that feeling of chemistry. You know, people are, you know, I work with people who are in the space of dating, and people are so, I would say, I feel like people fall into a couple of camps sometimes, but like either there's the kind of like chemistry evangelists. They're like, chemistry is like the most important thing. Like, I must have chemistry. If there's no chemistry after 10 minutes of me knowing this person, then it could never ever work. And they tried once and it didn't work, and they can tell you the terrible story about it. Or there's those that are a lot more like, oh, it's about values and who the person is, and like giving things time. And those could be on a spectrum as well. But I'm interested. What do you see as what actually works?
Yeah, I've done both. So in my early years of life, I was highly attracted to the chemistry, to that strong physical connection or the emotional connection, the dopamine hit, right? I was constantly looking for that dopamine hit and to feel good. I just wanted to feel good, right? I wasn't thinking about longevity. I was thinking about feeling good in the moment. And I realized quickly that that wasn't sustainable, right? Just seeking to feel good. That's not reality, you know? And so I started looking at, okay, well, what are my values? What are my values? What are my actual needs, my relationship needs, rather than having someone who's super attractive and can do all these spontaneous things with me and makes me laugh and blah, 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 like all these like superficial things that I wanted to make me feel good in the moment. What's actually going to be sustainable for me? Okay, someone that, values relationships, that prioritizes conflict resolution, that knows how to communicate, that knows how to tune into their feelings and listen to my feelings. 20-year-old Jessica would have never cared for that. You know what I mean? I just wanted to have fun. But, I'm also reaching 40, and that's exactly what I'm looking for now. So it's just reprioritizing what's actually good for you versus what actually, versus what feels good for you in the moment, what's going to be sustainable long term. And I think that comes with maturity, and I want to say age, but not really. A lot of people are still operating in that way. I think maturity, let's stop there.
Yeah. And we hope that maturity comes with age, but it's not
I
always the
know.
case, listeners.
No, it's not. It's not.
We've seen it with our clients.
Yeah.
Listeners, trust us, trust us. I've seen it. Age doesn't always
No.
automatically come, maturity doesn't always come with age. And I guess it makes me think is, I really agree with you. I was the same, I just was like following what felt good, and to some degree what made me look good. And I guess it's a question that comes to me from from clients, and I'm helping them through this, but I'd love to get your take on it, is how do we start to like train ourselves and shift what we're attracted to, like, as you know, because if we're drawn to the chemistry and the chemistry feels alive in us and it feels, you know, it makes us feel excited and it makes us feel like, oh, what's the next date going to be like, and all these sorts of things, to shifting to being more attracted to like who someone is, how they show up, their character, their values, you know, how they treat us and so forth. How do we start to make, what do we start to do to make the shift, to shift what we find attractive?
Absolutely. I mean, self-discipline. It's really just self-discipline and getting so clear on what are your relationship values. So
Mm,
if you value honesty, consistency, communication, emotional safety, whatever that is, how can you start aligning with those values yourself? So if communication is important to you, how are you communicating with yourself? Are you attuning with yourself? Are you checking in with your own feelings and needs? Right? How do you talk to yourself? Are you nice? Or are you critical? So it's so much of it is developing that relationship with yourself first and foremost. If you want to find a quality person, well then stop going after, the dopamine hits. It's really just about your own self-discipline and learning how to trust yourself and really knowing what you want. Um, and I think in that process, you cultivate a lot of self-respect. There's a lot of
mm,
self-respect. There's a lot of self-trust. And you're developing that language with yourself. You're developing the own language that you want to experience in your relationships. So yes, it all starts with identifying what those values are, creating discipline with aligning with those values in your own life. And that might look like working with a coach, working with a mentor to help you develop that, to help you recognize these things. Oops. Um, yeah. And yeah, just cultivating that within yourself.
mm. Yeah, yeah. And so much of these things, it comes back to self, you know, when we are in the dating, we're in the relationship, we're in the intimacy building, you know. I know our eyes look forward to that kind of impacts our ability in that way, but there's so much attention we put on the others or the other, or, you know, men or women. But so much of what you said and what I've heard you say today and how I've interpreted it is like, actually, like, so much more of where our attention needs to be is with us, whether that's our emotions, whether that's our values, whether that's noticing, you know, our own triggers, what we need for safety, and, you know, the sort of person that we want to be with. But it comes, really, it emanates from us and less about what the other people are doing and being.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Be what it is that you want to experience in the world. And it starts with you. And that's taking self responsibility, right? That's taking responsibility for your own life and cultivating that within yourself first. Yeah. And
Mm,
yes, relationship with ourselves. We forget that we're always in relationship with ourselves.
yeah, yeah. And it's so hard sometimes, isn't it? You see, it's so much easier to blame is a much blame. I guess I'm just like feeling it as I say it, is like, it's so much easier to go, if something's going wrong in my life, if I take on the responsibility, you know, responsibility and blame in our world is often feels like it's the same thing. Then there's something wrong with me. There's shame there. But blame is so much more of a relieving experience, because, well, if it's their fault, I'm free. I'm free. They are all, it's all them, all the avoidance, all the women, all the men, whoever it is, it's all them. And I have nothing to do. I'm free. I'm just this, almost a victim of the circumstances of life.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that's where you get in trouble. And that's where you keep repeating patterns over and over and over again. And then you just generalize and say, everyone sucks. You know what I mean? I'm just alone. And you hear that so much. I'm just going to live off the grid. I'm just going to do my own thing. Well, it's because you're not, maybe you're not taking responsibility for your own part in all of this. Right. So yeah, it takes a lot of courage to change. It takes a lot of courage to evolve. but you grow so much because of it. And all humans are wired for attachment. Innately, we all want love. We all want relationship. So don't, take that away from you. Don't take that opportunity away from you. It's such a beautiful experience when you can learn how to actually be present with it. And there's so much personal growth that can come from it as well. So,
100%, completely. Yeah. Oh, Jessica, it's been such a pleasure to speak to you today. And we feel like we covered so much ground, but as we said there, like so much of it comes back to ourselves. It isn't so much about what other people are doing and saying and their attachment and what their attachment isn't and other diagnoses we want to place on people, but actually, who we are and what we're consciously paying attention to and what we're wanting, we start to magnetize to some degree towards us and push away and choose to say no to the things that aren't what we want, whether that's the emotional safety we're not getting, or whether that's the type of partner we want, or whether that is, the attunement that we're really desiring.
yeah, absolutely. And one last thing is, see these opportunities or see these experiences with an anxious person, for instance, right? Who, by the way, is actively willing to work on themselves and things like that. See it as an opportunity for growth. See it as an opportunity to evolve, and it being such a beautiful experience. So much of it is how we choose to look at things as well.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Jessica, for today. Thank you for your wisdom, actually, and just the straightforwardness and simplicity in so many ways of what you said and the advice you've given. And I imagine the listeners are wondering where they can hear more from you, where they can work from you. And I also know you've got a book out as well.
Yes. So the book is for anxious attachers, but avoidance, if you want to learn about the anxious attachment, you're willing to grab a copy of the book. It's the Anxious Attachment Recovery Workbook. But if you want to find more about my work, my website, jessicadasilvacoaching.com. I have a podcast as well, Let's Talk Attachments. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you ever need.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jessica. And listeners, this is probably, I say this, but I often say this, but this is probably a perfect episode for you to listen to in your couple, for you to understand each other a little bit more, and for you to kind of have that emotional safety that maybe you want and maybe you're not quite giving to your partner as well. You can sit down, you can listen to this, you can pause at moments and talk about how you feel, and maybe they'll talk about how they feel, maybe they won't, and you'll just accept that as well. But this will be it's a lovely way to bridge between the two sides, what can feel like two warring sides when it comes to dating relationships, men and women and anxious and avoidant people. So share the love, share the episode with those that need to listen to this. And I'll finish up by saying big thank you to the guests. Thank you, Jessica. And a big thank you to you listeners. And I'll say ciao, ciao.